Hey everybody, good evening. It is me, Axel Lazuli. A little bit of a change of plan tonight. Instead of playing a game, we're going to be doing something new. We're going to be checking out a Pokemon fanfiction that I wrote that I've been writing for the last few months. If you would like to follow along with me tonight as I read, you can read along with me over on DeviantArt where I originally uploaded it. And if you are interested, I will also be eventually uploading a version to Wattpad with illustrations. So if you're an artist out there and you would like to have your art featured in the story and the upload, if you could get that to me by the end of the month through any means of communication. I'm on Twitter, I'm on DeviantArt, I'm here. So through any means that you can communicate with me, you're welcome to send those to me. Thank you for the $4.99, Blue Blur. I appreciate that. How's everybody doing tonight? Are we doing well before I get started? I see we have another one gone joining us. Worst Random Studios. Hey, welcome back, Heather Johnson. Hi, Omari. Welcome to the channel. Michael Melendez. Common Writer. My night's been going well. Thank you very much. Appreciate you for asking. Hey, Cardell. And we got Prime King Angel. What's up? What's up, Blue Blur and Patty? Thank you guys for joining me tonight. So this story, just a little bit of a preview, is a scary story. It's not super scary. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I would put this at 2. It's more of a thrilling story. The scariest part is that it involves a Pokemon named Frostlass who loves to freeze her victims and put them on display as ice blocks in her lair. So this is a Pokemon that likes to freeze people and Pokemon if she finds them to be to her liking for her collection. So we're going to be, featuring Frostlass this evening, and it tries to explain a little bit of the backstory about why Gordy, who is a rock Pokemon gym leader in Pokemon Sword, may not have followed in his footsteps of his mother, who was an ice type gym leader in Pokemon Shield. So without further ado, we're gonna get reading one more time. Here is the link, and you're welcome to read along with me.
I can see my reflection back there.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes.
I see it. It's okay. It's a new setup. So we're still getting moved in, and we got some new pieces of furniture. So thank you for bearing with me while I finish the setup over the next couple weeks. That's right. They're like, Moogie, he is here. Patty, I'm glad that you love scary stories. I think you are all really going to enjoy this. Let me zoom in. I am not blind. I certainly can't read this tiny text. Okay, here we go. We are now at 130% in. We can back that up a little. All right, roll with me here. She touches their unmoving faces in the darkness of her cave, the light in their eyes long gone. Now only they reflect the glowing yellow orbs of her stoic gaze, their expressions all different. Some died peacefully, others fully aware of her power as she stroked them tenderly, their heartbeat growing slower, until the ice takes them over. A young Gordy teased his sister by the fireplace, shaking his coat off, flinging droplets of icy water onto her forehead, which she left there, too fixated by his story to move. She pursed her lips, her cheeks puffing slightly, and then, finally, slammed one tiny balled fist onto his foot half-heartedly. "That's not funny. Mom told you to stop telling me scary stories before I go to bed," she griped. Gordy smirked, turning around and kneeling down, hovering just above her before he whispered, "Good thing this isn't a story, then. Good thing it's the truth!" He placed his snow boots by the fire to dry before he held up his finger, wagging it as he continued. "They die like that, you know, there in the dark, precious little Meowth, even a Flareon, frozen solid deep in her icy cave." As he finished removing his puffy coat and hanging it on a nearby hook to dry, he brushed a few idle snowflakes from his hair and pulled his sister's blanket, now abandoned as she pressed her face into their pet Meowth's brown fluffy side, over his shoulders. "Meowth would never let that happen," she squealed, shaking her head with renewed vigor. "Never!" "Uh-huh, and what would Meowth do? Purr on Frostlass? Ha! Didn't you know that Frostlass has a special ability? She can make you see things out there in the mountains, things you'd think are real. You might see a Meowth out there in the snow and follow him carefully. And then..." The little girl inhaled sharply, pulling Meowth in a little closer. He tried to pull away, but he was locked in a cuddle grip too tight to escape. You'll be frozen right in the middle of Frostlass's lair. Your feet will be locked to the ground where you'll be frozen solid before she eats your soul. Gordy's little sister ran squealing away then, bumping right into her mother in the doorway. Her arms were folded, and she wore a deep frown. Yes, Melanie didn't quite know yet what she was going to do with her son, but she was beginning to lose patience. There was only so much excuse his youth could buy on behalf of his blatant disobedience. I'm going to take a moment. Thank you guys so much for the donation. I saw that Kermo donated $10. Thank you so much, Kermo. And Blue Blur Productions says, Little Blur said hi to both of you. His iPad died. Oh, I'm sorry about that, Blue Blur Productions. Thank you. Thank you guys for the donations. And I think I've got... Great. Did I miss anything from Kermo? I don't think I did. Okay, great. Thank you guys. Gordy, we have discussed this. You're going to give her nightmares again. Gordy crossed his arms, his own arms, mirroring his mother's icy stare, and turned his head towards the fire, shrugging. Well, his mother scolded, what do you have to say for yourself? I hope that Frostlass doesn't get her. That's what I've got to say. Humph. That's it. To bed. Now. We're going to talk more about your behavior tomorrow. But if you keep this up, there will be no Pokemon training for you this summer. I'll just have to start training your sister to take the gym over instead. Gordy frowned. No, that couldn't be an honest threat. He was the oldest. Besides, none of his other siblings seemed all that interested in Pokemon training, preferring the company of their friends or their studies to the long, tedious hours it often took to build a bond with a Pokemon that would be strong enough to withstand the tides of battle after brutal battle. Yeah, I'll take over the gym, the little girl squealed. Not you. Well, there went that then. He hung his head and looked at his feet, now damp from the puddle that had trickled off of him from the rest of his wet snow gear, before he mumbled, I'm sorry, Mom. I won't scare her any more. I won't cause any more trouble with my stories. Melanie lifted her head skeptically and stared down at him. You said that last time, she reminded him. How shall I know you're not terrorizing your sister while I'm away? It's your job to be a role model for her, Gordy. You're the oldest. He nodded. I will be a better role model this time. Thank you, Mom. Melanie seemed a bit more satisfied with this answer and nodded. Jolly good, then. All right, little lady, off to bed with you. She turned to her daughter and patted her gently on the back, giving her a little push towards her room. When they had walked out of earshot, Gordy turned back towards the fire and mumbled, like we'd ever have anything exciting like a Frostlass encounter anyway. It was true that there were no Frostlass in the radius of their town, especially not in the early throes of winter in Sirchester, where snow was likely but non-sustaining unless you went closer to the mountains. As the temperature began to fall even lower, the mercury clinging in the negatives for weeks altogether, the Glalie would edge closer to town, and young trainers would practice their catching skills on the large and icy glacier-faced Pokemon. On one such cold, snowy morning, Gordy was working with his mother's Mr. Rhyme to shovel the snow from the sidewalk after their morning cup of tea. As they finished and started to head back into the house, a brown blur popped out, taking right off into the soft, cold puddles, leaping and bounding over the garden wall. Meowth! Gordy exclaimed, turning on his heels in a sudden frantic panic, dropping his shovel onto the sidewalk and making a mad dash after the house cat. Tearing open the side gate, Gordy flung himself into the deep snow, creating a trail with every difficult lurch forward. His snow coat was heavy, and he wasn't exactly a light kid himself, so right away his gasping breath left him ready to turn back around, but all he could hear in the back of his mind was his mother's voice scolding him for somehow letting Meowth out. It would be his fault, without a doubt. He sped up, reminding himself to breathe in through his nose and out through his mouth, but failing to get enough oxygen, he just resorted to breathing in and out through his mouth anyways. He could see Meowth in the snow flurries just ahead, and as the slope began to incline, Gordy's hope of catching him declined in tandem. Still, he pressed on, fighting the sudden wind that was running down the hillside. As he glanced back, he noticed his yard had grown tiny, and that he couldn't even see Rhyme anymore. Only the faint smoke trail from the chimney drifted up into the sky now, a wind-swept signal fire whose warmth he could no longer feel. The cold began to set in as he chased after the figure. Meowth would stop every so often, Gordy cursing the cat's fiendish nature under his breath. Meowth had done this before, but he had never run this far up the mountainside, and at that point, the hill really was all just mountain. The slick, ice-covered rock face slipped beneath his grasp, but he continued forward, gloved hands catching his weight as he clawed upwards. It was dangerous, but not impossible. He reminded himself that if he didn't get Meowth at this point, there would be worse fates to fear than his mother's outrage. Something might actually harm the house Pokémon, and he couldn't bear to think of his family's reaction then. The brown blur stopped ahead, once more waiting for him, as though guiding him through the white, windy quilt of winter towards the warmth of the sun, peeking through the thicket of gray clouds perched above. He seemed to disappear then, as Gordy hauled his bulk up over the lip of the craggy surface and sat waist-deep, surrounded by the ever-growing carpet of snowfall. Zero Boy says, I feel like I'm in first grade, listening to the teacher read. Simon says, I don't know why, but I feel so satisfied listening to this. And Kermo explained that, yes, I am a writer. And that's correct, Simon. I wrote this and I'm reading it. So it's a live reading of my fanfiction. And Doomboy, so far we have met Gordy and his family. And it looks like their pet Meowth has run off up the mountains of Sirchester, which is featured in Pokemon Sword. Young Gordy tried to stand once more, but fell forward, landing hard on his face. The snow before him was speckled with blood. As he wiped at his face with his frosted glove, he wasn't sure if it was his lip or his cheek he had busted. He had no choice but to crawl forward, as the ice and the slope combined made for terrain even his simple snow boots weren't cut out for. As he looked back over the mountainside he climbed up from, he could no longer see his house, or even the lights of Sirchester. There was nothing but the tundra surrounding him. After a continued slanted, upward climb, he pulled himself into an alcove cut straight into the rock face. Inside, he saw Meowth's bright yellow eyes and blank forehead coin gleaming in the dark. He looked out once more into the dim gray light of the tundra before entering the darkness. As he stood up, he realized that even the entryway had been tiny. This alcove of rock was much bigger within than he thought prior. He was able to stand, but there was very little light. He fumbled around for his Rotom phone in hopes to better see Meowth with his flashlight. But when he felt a sudden icy touch on the back of his neck, he whirled around, batting away at what unfortunately was a solid icicle. His hand collided with it. This act sent fragments flying towards the entryway, but not before slicing into his gloves, breaking skin first. He waved his hand about in a wild agony for a moment, biting down on his lip to keep from crying out in shock. Once he got his wits about him, he took off a glove and touched the screen of his Rotom phone, tapping the flashlight icon. As he looked around the entryway, he saw frozen stalagmites towering above him, around him, and ice stretched out in all directions, as if there was once running water here that had overflown and frozen. He wondered if the area thawed during other times throughout the year, if the holes he saw in the rock wall to his immediate right, pinpricks dotting the rockscape, were a result of meltwater or runoff activity. He heard Meowth and whirled to his left, catching a glimpse of his pesky pet's black-tipped tail slip past some of the rocky protrusions in a ways in front of him. He ran after him, light bouncing wildly around the icy chamber. Deeper and deeper, He chased after his swift, pesky friend, unaware of the gradual descent of the path, sloping downwards into the frigid grass of the mountainside, his adrenaline masking the fact that the air around them was growing surely and steadily colder. He didn't stop until he heard a sudden metallic clanging. The cavern opened up, and below him, far below, he saw flickering lights. At the bottom, he could see what looked to be dim glowing mine carts full of coal. Watching them move about, however, he soon realized they were Pokémon. He had never seen Carcoal before, and as he aimed his rotom phone at the creatures, he was astonished at the way they were clambering about. There were actual tracks, he noticed too, but he knew that Sirchester had stopped its mining business long ago due to a tragedy that had nearly ended the establishment over 50 years ago. They seemed to be crying out in distress, though he couldn't determine why. They were frantically looking around the cave, their raucous metal bodies bumping into one another hurriedly, as if they were looking for something. After a few more moments, he decided to press on, hoping that they could find what they were searching for. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear a strange, muffled sound, almost like a humming. He turned his attention back to the path ahead of him, and to the humming, where the shelf that was his path grew narrow. He had a difficult time pressing his girth against the wall, fearing that his bulk would cause him to tumble downwards. But he managed, squeezing into the rock face. He had to get down on his hands and knees to continue forward. He was covered in coal and dirt then, his face, gloves, and coat blackened by the walls of the tunnel. Again, it opened up into a larger cavern, but this one was different from the others. It seemed to be a dead end. The humming grew louder. He could see clearly now, as there was a faint glow to the icy formations in the room, an energy radiating around him that made his exhaustion wane for a moment. The rocks around him were glowing, a flickering neon in the dark. He looked around for Meowth, but as he approached one of the rock formations, he inhaled a sharp, sudden gasp. Within the icy statue was a face, a serene expression of peace upon a stoic Charmander. As his eyes trailed down to its flameless tail, he recognized the grim truth. The poor thing had gotten stuck in here and met its end. As he turned around, his eyes fell onto another icy tomb. This time, it was a Mawile with a... No! It was a trainer! And judging from his howery, thick pillow swine hair boots, and emblazoned family crest, he had been here for over 100 years at least. This was no modern wear at all. But even more disturbing, young Gordy noticed, was the fact that it looked as if the ice had been polished. As if someone or something tended to it, shaped the sculpture, and kept it clear of impurities so as to gaze upon the horror of the man and his Mawile, whose poor body and head looked as if her last moments were that of incomprehensible agony. Gordy took a step backwards, looking over his shoulder towards the narrow entryway. The humming seemed to be coming from all around him now. At this point, he had no remaining willpower or energy to continue to strive for the reconnaissance of Meowth. The mission had become too dangerous for him to continue. As he turned away from the trainer, he spotted another statue that he had overlooked on his way in. This one looked a little less icy, as if it had been created more recently. He stopped for a moment, pressing his face a little closer to the frosted surface. It was a Pokemon he had heard of, but never actually seen. Being the child of a gym leader certainly had its perks. He had seen many Pokemon, both from within and beyond Galar, but he'd never come face to face with a Drifloon. There were 3 of them, actually, and they looked as if, not long ago, they'd been floating idly in the sky. As he stared, they seemed to shift slightly. This ice sculpture was more like peering into a pool of water. The Drifloon rippled, and sure enough, he had to rub his eyes. They were floating in the clouds, so close he could just reach out and touch them. Gordy felt a strange tugging towards the scene, momentarily distracted from the humming. The Drifloon's heart-shaped handles were warm against his cheeks, a gentle clacking patter as they collectively pressed against him. He was about to reach up towards them when a shrill and rippling wave of sound broke the silence. A violin of wind, high-pitched and mournful, slicing through his thoughts. He turned suddenly and found himself staring nearly face to face with a haunting, beautiful sight. Her white kimono flared out from underneath her, ice horns sparkling in the dim light, pink obi glinting in the ethereal blue light around him. Beyond the Frostlass, however, he also noticed a baby roly-poly. There's ice over its mouth. The humming! It hadn't been humming at all. It had been screaming. The poor thing couldn't even cry out for help, stuck in a frozen prison, helpless as another layer of ice thickened around its body. Gordy wasn't exactly sure where its mouth would have been anyhow, but he could tell its cries were certainly muffled. The ice was almost over its head now, but Gordy didn't give Frostlass much time to think. In his fear and his panic, he tore forward. Frostlass was taken aback by his sudden awareness of the situation, but quickly fired an icy blast that narrowly missed his feet. He dove at the roly-poly, using his bulk to try and break its icy bonds. It all made sense now. The living minecart Pokémon herd had been looking for the baby all along. As his bulk collided with the rocky, one-wheeled, one-eyed Pokémon before him, he immediately felt the battle that had already been taking place between the ice and fire. Though the ice was thick, it was still slick. The roly-poly's internal temperature had been melting it, but Frostlass had still been slowly overpowering its strength over time. The ice gave way, and the two collided to the ground, Gordy's arms wrapped tightly around it, either out of fear or for the heat it emanated out into the otherwise icy chasm. He wasn't sure. The Frostlass looked from the Drifloon trio, then to Gordy, then back to the Drifloon. They must not have belonged here, Gordy realized, because Frostlass sent out an icy lightning at the balloon Pokémon. Gordy recognized it as the same attack that his mother's Lapras knew. Ice Beam! The Drifloon dodged it with ease, merely floating around it before each of them retaliated with gusts of wind that knocked Frostlass back. Before he could react further, the roly-poly had begun to move. His hands had already found the best grips to hold on to without him even realizing it, and he was dragged along for a few moments before he got up to his feet and awkwardly ran while hunching forward. The roly-poly stopped for a moment, causing him to trip over it entirely, and then rocketed forward with Gordy perched haphazardly on top. Take a moment here. It looks like Gordy is now stuck on top of his Pokemon friend here, roly-poly. CJ Destroya, hey, how you doing tonight? Cardell says I have to learn where she learned to write. Cardell, I've actually been writing for a very long time, and we can talk a little bit more about that after I'm done reading. And Patty said this is better than the creepypasta stories. Thank you, Patty. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Jody said you're so cool. Thanks, Jody. Cardell says this was God's plan. Thanks, Cardell. And Miles says, you look freaking cute. Hey, thanks, Miles. I appreciate you acknowledging my effort. And Cardell's working on a story for his game. Hey, that's cool. Keep it up. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And Blue Blur says, what do you think about Lavender Town? I love Lavender Town. I have a soft spot for creepy, scary things. So, and Papa Cat joined us, I see. Zero Boy's really enjoying this.
Papa Cat.
And we'll
Up
talk.
in this bitch.
Cool. Great. And yep. Oh, Cardell wants some motivation. Motivation, Cardell. Motivation. I cast it to you. And we shall continue. Yes, absolutely. So then, the roly-poly stopped for a moment, causing him to trip over it entirely, and then rocketed forward with Gordy perched haphazardly on top. Together, they tore past the narrow ledge and banked left into the darkness. Gordy pressed his eyes shut, everything around him quaking, his entire body juddering like "Rrrr," with the force and speed at which the roly-poly was unicycling forward. He held on for dear life, his legs scraping against the wall, his head being knocked on at one point hard, causing him to tuck it against the roly-poly's side and try the best he could, given his uneven placement, to shield his skull. For a long time, there was only the darkness and the sound of high-speed rock on rock. Eventually, he heard the high-pitched squealing of rock on metal and realized that somehow Roly-Poly had taken him to the old minecart tracks. He had handed everything over to his frantic companion here. He didn't know where he was going or if he was going to make it out of the ordeal alive. Things were heating up, that much he could tell, and he feared that perhaps they were going deeper into the mountain. The minecart tracks were more worn away in some places than others, but sparks flew around them from the speed and pressure Roly-Poly was exerting. They sped up, winding further and further down a deep spiral into the heart of the earth around them, rail grinding on a single metal track, endless. Eventually, there was a sudden light in the distance, but Gordy couldn't see it because his eyes were shut and his entire body focused on the task of keeping his bulk on top of Roly-Poly's stony back. He could feel blood making his grasp slippery, but he wasn't sure if it was coming from his head or his knuckles that had been scraped against the cave walls repeatedly, ripping and tearing through his gloves. The light hit him, a sudden blaze slicing through the darkness. Roly-Poly was still grinding on the rail, cutting through the snow with a speed that left smoke coming off the metal beam behind them as they raced forward. Gordy dared to open his eyes and eventually realized that this old track was leading them down the mountainside and closer to Sirchester. The wind stream cut at his cheeks, and he squinted in response as he leveraged his weight to perch on top of Roly-Poly, sitting now like he would a bicycle. He was able to lean with Roly-Poly on the turns now, and it surprised him how much fun he was suddenly having. Until the ravine. Though Gordy knew where the bridge was that led to Sirchester, it was nowhere near these abandoned mine tracks. It rolled into view faster than he knew what to do, a large drop-off ahead, deep and treacherous. This time, he didn't squint his eyes. The matter of energy was no longer a question. Adrenaline thrummed through him, and his heart jackhammered in his chest. He had never felt his chest lock up this way, or his muscles seize the way they did. He heard Roly-Poly speeding full force ahead, trembling beneath him, and though Gordy could sense its trepidation, he could also feel its determination growing, a hot wellspring of energy and heat bubbling up, pressing against his palms in the form of warmth. Up! Up! They sprang, the sparks giving way for a moment to airborne fragments of rock, the Roly-Poly's one wheel chipped from the sheer friction, and they went spiraling downward. Sirchester was there, in the distance. So close, but yet so painfully far. Suddenly, the wind roared around them, and the two sprang upward as Roly-Poly tumbled forward, rapid spinning toward the edge of their makeshift landing. The two tumbled into the deep snow, narrowly making it onto the land. As Gordy lay there sprawled in the deep, powdery, soft chill around him, he let out a sigh of relief. The Roly-Poly had used rapid spin, but vertically. It was smart. He sat up and admired him, its gray, lumpy body. It looked so simple, and yet for its size, it was an absolute powerhouse. He wondered at the Pokémon for a long while before he reached out a hand and placed it just above its eye. That was amazing! You're just so freaking cool! He laughed, kicking his feet on the ground for a moment before throwing his arms around the Roly-Poly. He could feel the heat of its blush coming off its rocky face in waves. He nuzzled it for a moment, and they sat locked there, resting in one another's peace, presence, and admiration. When Gordy finally stood up, the roly-poly looked back at the mountain thoughtfully for a long time. "I can take you back here later, when it's safer. It's getting late," he said. I know. Why don't you come home with me, and my mom can make us some nice curry? You're just so cool. I just want to be friends." He smiled and gave the roly-poly a thumbs up. He never had such a connection with a Pokemon before. Sure, he cared about Meowth, but he felt like roly-poly understood. There was an undeniable connection here, and the roly-poly bounced up and down on its rocky wheel, emitting low-sounding grumbles and a few small puffs of smoke. Together, they made the long hike towards Sirchester, roly-poly spiraling around Gordy through the snow, leaving figure eights and slush wherever it rolled. As Gordy and roly-poly chased after one another, enjoying the last rays of sunlight and the frigid, fresh air, they played a game of tag where the victor didn't matter. Only the dance of legs and wheels, the power, strength, and beauty of being a new Pokemon trainer. And that's the end. So that's the end of Roll With Me here. And I probably began writing this about, I want to say last November, maybe late last October. So I've been writing it for a couple months now. I really had a good time with this. And I know a few people have asked, well, what happened to Meowth? I know Deox had asked in the chat of my actual submission on DA. He had said, fantastic, so a question. Was the Meowth going up to the mountain an illusion, luring Gordy to the Frostlass? I am going to leave that for you to wonder. That was intentional. Doomboy says, that was great, you should do more readings. Cam says, I loved it. Justin says, that was amazing. Blue Blair said, that was awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I'm really glad that you liked it. I am probably going to be working on another story taking place in the desert, and there's going to be a cacturn involved. So it's going to be another scary little whirlwind. It might even be darker, we'll see. And yes, Cam, I do have thunder and lightning. Papa Cat's got a face. That's right, Papa Cat. Darkness. Patty says, I love it. Thank you, Patty. I'm glad that you guys really enjoyed the reading. I will definitely have more readings then if you guys enjoyed this. So definitely will be sharing more of my writing. I've been writing for a long time. I know a few of you asked earlier, where did you learn to write? Where did you learn to write like this? Well, I've been writing since, well, for as long as I can remember. I was writing poetry since I was very young, probably since first grade I began writing poetry, and then I began writing more short stories and things, and began taking writing a little more seriously around the time I was 11, and I was really heavily involved with an online fan fiction creation group centered around the Koopalings and Super Mario, so I kind of got my start there, and that was back when you couldn't really just like upload stuff to the internet. The webmaster, like fanfiction.net didn't exist yet, and so you had to like find a website, and there was a webmaster who ran his website, and he had to approve your submissions, and I rewrote my first submission 8 times before he finally accepted it. And I just spent my summer between, like, I want to say 6th and 7th grade. Yeah, 6th and 7th grade, like, rewriting this story, and through several power outages. I lost the ending at one point, had to rewrite it. So that's kind of where I got started in writing, and then eventually my love of writing took me to school for writing. So I actually majored in English, and I have my master's in English. So that's where I continue to sharpen my skills. So I know a few of you had a few more questions during the reading. If I missed what you had said, feel free to repeat it at this time. Go ahead and repeat that in the chat for me. I'll go back and look, see if I missed anything. But we have... I shouldn't miss anything. Oh, Zero Boy said I want to illustrate this fanfic. In case any of you joined a little late, I will actually be uploading this also on to Wattpad, featuring illustrations by you. So if you guys can get it to me by the end of the month, or if you need a little more time, just shoot me a message. But hopefully I can get those by the end of the month. And I was going to go ahead and upload that to Wattpad. So Yes, Adriano Gaming Plays. We just finished the story, so you can go back and replay this. Here's the story if you want to read it for yourself. And if you guys don't have any questions, I'll be signing off shortly. So this is what I get for keep writing beatbox battle repeatedly. Yes, Ant Green, if you just keep writing, it will take you places. You will learn things about yourself and find challenges that you never knew existed. It's like a whole different world out there. Hidden. Hidden away. It's a good world, though. It's definitely worth undertaking. Hey, Enix, how you doing? I see you. I see you. And Zero Boy says, I have a comic. I have to make a comic. Yes, Zero Boy, you do. You should. Absolutely. Hello, Cat God Robot. We are about to be signing off. If no one has any more questions about writing or about this fan fiction here, I will get going. I know Moogie Mikey's got to start streaming soon. He's going to be streaming his drawing. And how do I get something that tells me that you're making videos, Ant Green says? Well, there's a couple things you can do, Ant Green. You can follow me on Twitter. It's at Axel Lazuli. If anybody in any of my mods are here, they can drop that. That is my Twitter handle. And so you can sign up there. I always retweet. I tweet out that I'm going to be going live shortly. You can also hit that like button, the subscribe button, hit the bell, and that will tell you how you can get notified when I go live. Adriano says, are you going to make a Roblox video? Yes, Adriano, I'm still in the middle of working on that. And Harry's talking about voice work. We could talk more about that tomorrow, Harry. He wants me to, next time you voice Helena, I'd like it if you'd use a Sally Acorn voice. I will listen to that tonight.
It's Helena.
Helena. My apologies. Thank you, Moogie Mikey. Thanks for subscribing, Cat Got Robot. I like your username. I'm a sucker for rhymes, though. Hey, Sanaski. Welcome back, Cardell. I am about to be headed off here if you guys don't have any more questions about writing or fanfiction or Pokemon. What was your question again, Cardell? I answered a couple questions. Remind me of what yours was, and I will be happy to answer that for you before I head off for the night. I'll see you next time, Adriano. I'll be working on more fanfiction, so you can keep your eyes peeled. I'll be back here. And I'll be back tomorrow to play some Animal Crossing. Zero Boy says, Sucker for Rhymes sounds like a song name. It does, doesn't it? I think I did answer your question, Cardell. If it was about where I started writing, I did. Where did you learn to write? Yes. And Catgut Robot, you can watch my entire Pokemon Sword playthrough if you go check out my channel playlist. I've got that. On Wednesday, I covered my reaction to the Direct in the morning, and then I followed it up with a Pokemon Cafe Mix live stream, followed by my continued adventures on the Isle of Armor. So Wednesday was an entirely Pokemon day, so you can go check out my playlist for that stuff. And Cardell, I learned to write. I've been writing for as long as I can remember. Short story, long story short. I began writing very seriously, tried to take myself seriously around the time I was 11, and had to rewrite my first fan fiction for a webmaster 8 times, and was really in a tight-knit writing community that eventually dissipated about the time I went to college. I went to college for writing too, and I've been writing just essentially for a long time. So you could rephrase that if I'm not answering quite what you want to answer. And Adriano, is that you made that Yoshi? Yes, Adriano, that's actually one of my OCs. Her name is Tila. She is a Yoshi with fangs, with ghost-like powers. So. And I ended up getting my master's degree in English. So writing, creative writing. Go ahead, Cardell. You can rephrase if there's an area of that question I didn't quite explore. So that's how you've grown to that level. Yeah, essentially I've been writing for a very long time, Cardell. Writing is a passion and hobby of mine. I would like to say I live for writing. I mean, that's literally what drives me. It's everything I do ties somehow back into writing. So even video games tie back into writing. And yes, Aaron, you can see Mikey in the mirror.
Yep,
and Papa Cat, that's right. Yes, tomorrow is finally time for Animal Crossing. I'll probably be streaming a little earlier. I don't normally stream around noon, I want to say. Moogie, can we go live around noon, you think?
early afternoon.
Early afternoon. Okay,
Because,
so
yeah, we're in Central Time.
yeah,
so.
we're in Central Time, so I got to keep an eye out for that now. And I will see you guys tomorrow then. If there's no more questions, thank you, Cardell. I'm glad that it shows. I'm gonna keep producing more writing, and I'm really glad that to have received such a warm reception on this video. So I'll keep making these then if you guys like them, and I will see you guys tomorrow for more Animal Crossing. We're gonna go swimming and diving, a new update in the game. They're talking about your pickle video.
What did you say?
And Cardell says, I just want to make a story that's just as nutty as a hunk of squirrel crap. Now I have the tools. Cardell, in regards to writing nuttily crazy things, I have written some more humorous things in my past. The best advice I can give you is I practice writing what's called stream of consciousness. I'm sure you know what this is, but maybe a few people might not. Stream of consciousness is when you just write the first thing that comes to mind. And then the more you level up in writing, the more natural that stream of consciousness begins to sound. It sounds less like a garbled mess and more like, hey, this is an actual person or something, creature with thoughts sentience I can relate to. So if you practice your own stream of consciousness writing and then just try to get in character about what their stream of consciousness would look like, eventually you can like build that bridge to begin writing. And then for me, that helps me write humorously. So hopefully that helps. And aw, thanks Adriano Gaming Plays. Appreciate the $1.99. 2 thumbs up back for you. And the bright gun. I enjoyed Zoop today. I'm glad that you have a notebook full of ideas. Keep those notebooks, Cardell. They will come in handy. They really will. And I want to see a new story, also memes as an upgrade. Cool. There will be more stories soon. This is what I'm here for. I bring the good vibes. Yes, you do, Cardell. Dang, me gots to wake up, Papa Cat says. Yes. Papa Cat, it won't be too early. It'll be early afternoon. Let's say, I want to say maybe 1-ish or around Eastern time. You know, it'll be noon for us, 1 o'clock for Eastern timers. So keep an eye out on my Twitter and every character. That's exactly, Cardell. Virtual hugs. Virtual hugs. And thanks, Adriano. I love you too. I appreciate that. And Ant Green, it's okay if you missed the story. You can go back and rewatch the live stream. It'll be here for you. And then I'll take one more question before I go ahead and turn over everything, the room, our office, to Moogie here. And Harry asks, what kind of writing do you do? Harry, I've done a little bit of everything. I have practiced extensively in script writing, actually. I really like writing 10-minute plays. I haven't published any of them yet. I'm actually sitting on a lot of work that I quit sending things out for publication around the time I was 17 or 18, right before I started going to college, and decided I was going to go sharpen my sword. So I'm just now kind of, really beginning to polish up, kind of like polishing rocks. I'm beginning to polish some things up, and I'll be sending them out for publication soon. So yeah, you can keep an eye out for that. I'll definitely let you guys know when I have something published. And I'm also working on a short novella that I will tell you more about on Twitter. So great, Papa Cat. I'm glad that you will be up. And I love you too, Jody. Thank you. I know you said that you also go by Enix. So thank you. Thank you, Enix. Thanks for the loves, guys. Thanks for the love. I appreciate you all. So alright guys, I'm going to head off for the night. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully for more Animal Crossing, and then followed by, of course, as always, our Saturday Moogie Mikey How to Draw streams. So I'll see you over on Mikey's channel, and you take care. Bye guys. Have a good night. Stay creative in your little corner of the world out there. Stay creative.